There we go.
Yeah, there we are. Yeah.
Okay, that makes more sense. I think Microsoft Teams changed a few things. So attendees now, if you can hear you now. Perfect. That's great, everybody. Sorry, there was a minor issue there with me not actually starting the meeting. And so, Catherine, we do have a sign language interpreter coming to join us. I just have to give her the permission now to present as well. So Joe, you're saying you have no sound. So if everybody else if you can hear us speaking, so some people can hear. So Joe, if you're unable to hear, that could be an issue on your side. So let me see. Okay, gotcha. So can anybody see?
No, Catherine hasn't come up yet.
No. Allow camera.
There, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I've allowed your camera there, Catherine. Sorry now, everybody. We will get there. The microphone. Anybody else find technology is the annoying things here?
Yeah.
So, Catherine, I have allowed, and have we lost Stephen?
He's back.
There you are. So, Catherine, I have allowed your mic and camera. If you can hear me, if you can allow it, maybe on your side, and we'll try to get you up. So, if there is anybody in the attendees today who does need the ISL interpreter, we are trying to get Catherine there on the line. You do have the option to put on the captions yourself. In the settings, in the top right-hand corner, there is a set where you can go to accessibility, and you can also turn on the captions. You could for yourself. So,
no.
So Catherine can see herself on the screen, but we can't see herself. Okay, I'm going to continue to try and get Catherine in there. But what we'll do is we'll try to kick off while I'm dealing with some technology issues as well. So let me just start by, welcoming everybody and thanks as well for the time everybody's dedicating to this. And just to say as well, we have Karen joining from her holiday in France. Not only is it her holiday, but Catherine has also got engaged in the last few days. So we have to offer her a huge congratulations, and she should probably just be out sunning herself and not paying attention to us. But I think this is the dedication of Karen has for this topic area. So let me just make sure as well.
No, Catherine can't see you.
No. Yes, congratulations to Karen there. So
thank you.
Record and transcribe. Okay, so we are recording the event today as well. So if there are any issues, people have to drop off, things like that, then we will. I'll be taking notes, and I'll be sending out all of the notes to everybody after, even if you haven't been able to attend. So today we're going to cover talking about reasonable accommodations in the workplace, what you need to know. A lot of you guys sent in questions beforehand, and so I've taken notes of those questions. But I'd also like to say that please use the chat function to ask questions throughout, and we will be able to make it as interactive and engaging and deal with as many questions as possible. So we have an amazing bunch of experts here today. We have Stephen Kelly, Managing Director of Ability Focus, Karen Chadwick with Spina Bifida Hydrocephalus Ireland, and Chris Hamblin, who is a consultant with CareScribe, who create products like Captioned, we're speaking to today. Everybody will, oh, that's a bit blurry. Everyone will introduce themselves in a moment, but we are going to cover, just to give a bit of a framework, what are reasonable accommodations, why and when you need to provide them. People want to know about how do we change mindsets in our corporation for an inclusive culture, the myths and misconceptions around hiring people with disabilities or providing accommodations, what supports are available for you as employers, for your organization. We'll have a demo from Captioned with Chris, and we really want to try and pack this with lots of practical tips, tactics, and tools to help you get started or to start looking at things within your organization. So I'm going to stop sharing that there. And like I said, all of this will be recorded, and you will get all the notes and a summary of notes as well afterwards. So I'm actually going to first introduce myself anyway, just while we have the housekeeping done. And so I am Niamh Kelly. I have brought together this organization, Leaders for Accessibility, because there is a need for us to do better in society, in the workplace, for people with disabilities. And what I find is that there's a lot of companies want to do better, but maybe they don't know how and they don't know where to go. So this organization is all about breaking down the barriers, bringing education, and bringing the specialists and the solution providers together. So I am from Ireland. I am a white female with brown hair, brown eyes. Today I am wearing a purple top. So I will hand it over to Karen to introduce yourself and what you do.
Hi, I'm Karen. I am the employment facilitator with Spina Bifida Hydrocephalus Ireland. So my aim is to help people with spina bifida and hydrocephalus find suitable and sustainable employment in the workplace. I'm also there to engage with employers like this, trying to support them in supporting their employees with disabilities. I'm a white female, long red hair. I wear glasses. I'm wearing a red and blue and white top.
Great, thanks, Karen. Chris?
Thank you. My name is Chris Hamblin, and yeah, I'm a sort of senior AT assistive technology consultant at CareScribe. CareScribe have developed 2 pieces of assistive technology to support individuals with disabilities for both the education sector and for workplace. My responsibilities are for working with organizations who wish to provide the reasonable adjustments and implement our software to support their cohort of employees in that working environment. I'm a white male. I have dark hair. I have slightly longer than stubble as far as facial hair is concerned, and I am wearing a black polo shirt.
Super. And Stephen?
Yeah, so thanks, Steve. Hi, everybody. My name is Stephen Kelly. I'm the Managing Director of Ability Focus and what would be termed a Disability Inclusion Specialist. I'm a white male, aging now in my mid-40s. I have short brown hair and a bald patch, which thankfully none of you know about. I'm wearing glasses and I have a beard with slight tints of grey at the front. I'm wearing a blue long-sleeved top and I'm coming to you today from my office here in Meath. At Ability Focus, what we do is we deliver disability awareness training. We provide a lot of reasonable accommodation supports. We also do reasonable accommodation training as well to government departments, state bodies and multinationals and corporates with a view to creating more disability inclusive workspaces. We deliver training not only to companies in Ireland, but across the UK as well as mainland Europe as well. And as I said, we've done a lot of work recently over the last couple of years around reasonable accommodation policies as well as reasonable accommodation processes. And I'm hopefully going to be able to give some good inputs today to people tuning in.
Yeah, thanks so much. And Stephen, you're one of the brave ones with age. I never include that one. It's great. So I do see some questions coming in, but we'll start, you know, for just even to make sure that we're all on the same page, all on the same wavelength with what we're talking about. You know, Stephen, what are reasonable accommodations?
So reasonable accommodations, they're effective and practical measures that an employer, for potentially, if we're talking about employees, is required to put in place, which will enable a person with a disability to be able to carry out their work on an equal footing with other people. When we look at service provision, it's anything that you do that goes above and beyond in normal service provision to assist somebody with a disability to access your services. You know, these things can include anything, and it's anything from the physical adaptation of the workplace, assistive technology, time off for appointments, remote working, and so on. You know, I think when we think about what reasonable accommodation is, it's really, really important to start changing that narrative in it always being the very physical adaptations, you know, the ramps, the revolving doors, the screen readers. It is that, of course. But what we find is so often that's already done. You know, the majority of accommodations that you as a manager, as a business owner or HR professional will have to make, you know, it's not going to be an expensive physical adaptation. I spent 12 years working in employer supports, and I can count on one hand the amount of times expensive physical adaptations were made. The vast majority of reasonable accommodations we see in international workplaces are accommodations such as time off, you know, time off for medical appointments relating to having a disability, extended break time, remote working time, or adjusting somebody's working schedules. You know, so the reason I think these as reasonable accommodations are the most common is because the vast majority of disabilities that we see in any country, they're invisible and generally tend to be acquired. It's believed anywhere between 70 to 80% of all disabilities are going to be invisible and acquired at an adult working age. So I think, you know, it's the team leader, what we see people coming to us looking for advice around a woman in her mid-40s who's multiple sclerosis, or a colleague or a team member in their mid-30s who has Crohn's, somebody who's chronic pain. And a lot of these accommodations, they don't cost anything. What they do take is a little bit of time, you know, at the start, get the accommodations right, and you can have a very productive employee. And I think so often what we see, the kickback we see is people will say, well, you know, will providing accommodation, will it cost us time? You know, will it cost us money? But what we always say is not providing the accommodation will cost you time and will cost you money. You know, so it's very, very important to recognize that if somebody comes to you and if they need sign language interpreters to do an interview, if they need ergonomic workstations, computer software, or a time to remote work, it's about putting the time and effort into that at the start, make the accommodation, and I think you'll have a much more happier employee and you'll have a much more productive business as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I just one question I'll just come to in a second, but I am still having issues with the interpreter. I have allowed the access, but there's something blocking the access on that. So I am still I am making the presenter, I am making her the signer, but still the screen isn't showing. So I am trying to work on that. So my apologies. I can't see what the issue is with that, but I'm still trying to do that and allow Catherine to get in. So yes, my apologies massively on that area. And just one thing on providing the adjustments and providing the accommodations. A question there is around is neurodivergence included in this? Should we allow for you know, reasonable adjustments for employees that are neurodivergent? Does that fall into the same category?
Yeah, so, you know, well, first of all, there's a few questions coming in. I know we have a few people tuning in from the UK. In Ireland, it's reasonable accommodations. In the UK, it's reasonable adjustments. It's the same thing. So we would say accommodations, you would say adjustments. Over in the United States, it's accommodations as well. So generally, depending on the country, it's accommodations or adjustments. Ultimately, you know, there is no A to Z list of what classifies or constitutes as a disability in virtually any country worldwide. Okay, so I think what we need to do and what any managers or business leads need to recognize is the fact that labeling something doesn't make it a disability. What makes something a disability is the level of impact that it has on that person's ability to work. So whether you're neurodivergent, if you have dyslexia, if you have ADHD or autism, for example, if you've a physical disability or any form of sensory issue, for example, you know, it's not the label or the naming of the condition that makes it a disability. Is does that condition cause a substantial impact on their ability to work? If it does, then you should be looking into the provision of accommodations for that person.
Yeah, like you said, accommodations and adjustments, they are the same. It's just that we use them in different Ireland or the UK. And so, Karen, you've worked for a number of years with people with disabilities and trying to support them in the workplace and the employers. You're also somebody with lived experience, you know, so what do you what's your opinion on how employers should be providing or should be thinking about what they need to provide for people, whether it is a, you know, physical disability, it is an invisible one, or a neurodivergence. Now we're aware of all of these things. You know, what do employers need to do and what do they need to think about?
Well, first of all, as I think Stephen mentioned earlier on, these should be happening before they even have an employee with a disability. They should be in place already. They should be looking forward to potentially having employees with disabilities. There are a number of things that an employer can do to make sure these things are in place. There are loads of grants available and schemes. There's the Workplace Adaptation Grant, the Wage Subsidy Scheme, for example, Reasonable Accommodations Fund. There's lots of different grants and schemes that are available to employers out there that if they could find that information online at Disability Federation of Ireland, AHEAD, any number of charities will have this information on their websites. They can get those grants ahead of time. The accommodations in place. Some of those grants will only be available if you already have a person with disability working for them. But there's
I think we have French connection issues, maybe. This is what happens when you're in wooden cabins in when you are in wooden cabins in France. Adjustments should start at the recruitment process. We have a message there about from Sarah.
including
Can grants Karen listed be added in the chat, please?
Sorry,
yes, so I have.
I was gone there. Can anybody hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. So in terms of some of the things that people will mention, I'm going to add links. So Karen mentioned some grants that are available in Ireland, and there are different grants that are available in the UK. So I'll add some links here as well. And it is important to be aware of that. Maybe employers and employees don't know there is support there for some of the adjustments, and actually captioned with Chris is available through the Access to Work scheme in the UK. So if you want to tell us a little bit more, maybe Chris, maybe we have some people that don't know about the Access to Work scheme. What is it and how can they avail of captioned through that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Access to Work scheme is a sort of publicly funded employment support grant scheme that aims to support individuals with a disability start or sort of stay in work. It can provide practical and financial support for people who have a disability or a physical or mental health condition. What's really interesting with the Access to Work scheme is you don't have to have a officially sort of diagnosed disability or a diagnosis. So that becomes very useful for a lot of individuals and also a lot of employees from that perspective. Access to Work can be used for flexible working arrangements, such as sort of hybrid working. It can include support to work from one location to another, and it can support from working from home for all or even part of that time. It allows the employee to get support and then sort of extra costs of working they may have because of their disability or health condition. So, for example, they're able to obtain aid and equipment in the workplace, adapting equipment to make it easier for them. This can include things like assistive technology, sort of hardware, etc. They can get money towards any additional costs to travel. They can get help with support workers, as well as sort of interpreters for interviews, etc. It's a very good scheme. It's very popular over in the UK. And one of the reasons it's popular is because as an employer, if your employee goes through the Access to Work scheme, they will sort of have conducted an official Access to Work assessment by an official Access to Work assessor. Through the right questioning, will then provide recommendations for what could be hardware and or software training for neurodivergent individuals, etc. And then that employee can go back to the employer, and then the employer will actually, whilst they will have to purchase and pay towards things such as hardware and software, there will be reimbursement, and that reimbursement really depends upon the size of the organization. So for a sole trader, there is 100% reimbursement. And I think, don't quote me on the exact figure, but it's around about £69,000 of worth of support an individual can obtain in the course of a 12-month period. But as the organization grows in size, so therefore the contribution is sort of slightly less from the Department of Work and Pensions, who will reimburse. As far as our software is concerned, yeah, thankfully we're very grateful, but both of our pieces of software, Caption in particular, are frequently recommended to support individuals with a plethora of different diagnoses to support them in their day-to-day activities, based on the kind of software that it is. It's a very good scheme. Worth mentioning now that aside from the Access to Work scheme, because it's got so popular, there is a slight sort of, I suppose, negative to it at the moment, in that it can take a little while from this start to end process. So for an individual to start the process off online, it can take up to sort of 12 weeks to have that first sort of consultation with a case manager, and then maybe a subsequent assessment. Once that's gone through, it can then get sort of processed, and it can end up in some cases taking up to 20 weeks, which for some people that's absolutely fine. But there are other sort of employers that say, look, we can't afford to wait that long for you to be up and running and operational. So there is another avenue, and that goes down along the lines of things like a private workplace needs assessment, where I appreciate there is a cost for that, and there is no reimbursement should you go ahead and purchase either of these bits of hardware or software, etc. But these things can be turned around maybe in a 2-week period, and that employee can be up and operational in that time. So there's lots of options available for employers.
Yeah, and some people are saying, like, this is great information. Maybe they don't know about the process. Some people are in the process, and like you said, the waiting time can be long. So maybe the employer or the employee needs to purchase something and then wait for reimbursement. But it, and that's unfortunate. But you can get some of these accommodations like captioned through the Access to Work. So we had a question just around, when should adjustments start? Is it just at the recruitment period? And really it might come down to, should your organization have a process around providing adjustments or accommodations? And if they don't, what should they do? So Stephen, what would you say about creating an internal process?
Yeah, so we do reasonable accommodation training pretty much all the time now, and all of our programs funnel into one kind of end result, and it's that you must ensure that your company has a reasonable accommodation policy and a reasonable accommodation process. Okay, the reason is, if you can imagine you're working for a large organization and there are departmental managers all over the country, whether you're in the UK or in Ireland, you need continuity of application right across the organization. And what we mean by that is there's no point in one manager in one department, when they're presented with a colleague who has a disability and needs adjustments or accommodations, reacting one way and providing them with high levels of accommodations, being very proactive and very a good manager because they're confident and they know what to do. And then you've got another manager in a different part of the same business who isn't confident. They don't really know anything about disability. They don't know what to do. And you've got an employee being provided with a different level of accommodation potentially. I think the key thing to have is have a process. Okay, and what that is, it's what we in our training we do kind of the 5 steps of reasonable accommodations, and it's really important because if you have that process that everybody is aware of, then if you have an acquired disability and you think you might need accommodations, you can access the process which will be part of your reasonable accommodation policy. If you're a manager and somebody formally or informally tells you that they have a disability or something that might be a disability, you know what to do. And I think what we do so often in the UK and in Ireland is we leave it up to individual managers who don't know a lot about disabilities to start making accommodations. So having a clear, reasonable accommodation process, whether you're an SME or whether you're a large international organization, is very important. And I think not enough organizations have that. A lot of the process is built into the policy. And again, this is something that we're seeing more and more organizations in Ireland starting to do and more in the UK starting to do as well. And what the policy is like, this is a key document because if you have this and you make it available to everybody, not just your managers, not just your HR team, not just the senior leadership team, then again, everybody will know what hymn sheet you're all singing off. Okay, so basically the policy, it's a document which clearly outlines your organization's commitment to providing accommodations for anybody, primarily with employees who have requirements. So have your policy, and within that policy, have it clearly written out what is your reasonable accommodation process. And that will vary from company to company. It's about sitting down with somebody such as yourselves or some other providers and figuring out what works best for you. But again, getting that continuity of application right across your organization is really, really important.
Yeah. And we have a question about like what are the steps towards that? And like you said, Stephen, maybe those steps are individual to the organization, or is it a universal 5 steps that you kind of encourage companies to employ?
Yeah, so we've kind of built our training around the kind of the building blocks ultimately to reasonable accommodation. So again, you got the first one, which is disability disclosure. So I think when an employee goes to their line manager or team lead and they say, I have acquired disability X, whatever that may be, I think I might need accommodations. What's the process? That's fairly easy for managers to deal with, I think. In most we know what to do. It's a formal disclosure. You start the process. What a lot of organizations don't realize, certainly here in Ireland, is that informal knowledge of a disability also classifies as knowledge of a disability. So if you have an employee who's working for you and they say on a sunny Thursday morning or during the lunch break that you're going for your lunchtime walk or you're having a chat very informally, and they actually during that informal conversation say that, look, geez, the reason I've been out so much over the last year is because I actually have a specific disability, whatever that may be. It's having quite an impact on me professionally and socially, whatever that may be. Hopefully I'll be fine. From that moment onward, that manager now has a knowledge of a disability and the company now have knowledge of a disability. You've had informal disclosure. So that's very important to have that level of awareness. Disclosure doesn't have to be formal. It can be informal. And that once you have that level of knowledge, you should be proactive in looking to support the person. So that's the first step that we talk about, disclosure. The second thing is objective analysis. The big thing we hear from managers, especially in large companies and HR professionals, is that if we let Stephen have these accommodations, Stephen's working the night shift and he now wants to switch to the day shift because he has sleep apnea. Sure, if we let him have this switch, is everybody going to come to us now looking for the change to the easier shift or whatever that may be? So objective analysis is really, really important. That you actually can't give further consideration to opening up the floodgates, because then you won't be looking on each individual person on their own as a singular entity. You have to give consideration to each individual person and their own circumstance. Then you procedural obligations, which is the third step, which is process. The substance, what you offer somebody as an accommodation, or what you choose, or what you decide you can't offer them, that actually doesn't matter, as strange as it might sound to everybody. What you can or cannot offer somebody as an accommodation is nowhere near as relevant as can you demonstrate that you have process, that you were made aware of a disability, you followed steps 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then you came to your decision. So you have to be able to demonstrate that you followed process as well, without showing how you came to your decision, without any clear or objective reasoning. And then you've disproportionate burden, which is the fourth aspect, which is it's relevant to everybody. Everybody has a bottom line. Everybody runs a business. Everybody needs to turn a profit. So there are EU equality directives. There is a legislation and case law that ultimately references that, look, you have to provide reasonable adjustments or accommodations as long as they are reasonable as well. And then finally, we finish off with policy and process. And it's ensuring that you have a policy that everybody is aware of. It's in the staff canteen room. It's in your intranet. Everybody can access that at least once a year. and everybody is fully aware of your clear process. So I think, that there's a lot to it, but I think if you get it right once, then things will flow a lot easier from that,
Yeah, and I think one of the things that people asked a lot in the questions beforehand as well is around disclosure, and you've touched on that point. One thing people want to do is, or need to do, is maybe change the mindset and change the culture and create that environment for disclosure, which that can probably be hard. So Karen, what can employers do in order to create a place, an environment that supports and encourages, disclosure?
Well, I think from the very beginning, your job description, how you advertise the role, and ensuring that you have advertised, or on your advert that you're an employer who will give reasonable accommodations. No hoops to have to jump through to get these reasonable accommodations. For example, for the job interview, that they will allow they allow a variety of different interview types. So they could have somebody who would record their answers to the questions ahead of time and send in the video, something like that. So from the get-go, they are seen as an understanding and flexible employer. So that will immediately create I suppose, a safe space for an employee to disclose that information, whether they decide to disclose that at interview stage or when they've accepted it, or if they are currently employees as well.
Yeah. But is it up to, where is the onus, let's say, where's the responsibility? Is the responsibility on the employer to find out, or is it on the employee to tell, to disclose? Because there are a lot of people, and you can see it on LinkedIn almost on a daily basis, that people have job offers revoked once they do disclose and once they do reveal a disability. And it might show that even though maybe the recruiter, the talent acquisition partner, is okay with disclosing it, but when it goes to the hiring manager and when it goes into that department, perhaps that's when there is misalignment and miscommunication within the entire culture of the organization.
Yeah, and that's a huge fear for everybody with disabilities when they do go for job interviews, is when do I disclose this? When is the safest time to disclose this? And as I said, I think it's the onus is on the employer to ensure that they've created a safe space for them to do that, to be able to disclose it. But also, again, the onus is on the employee to ensure that they do disclose this. Now, it's a very personal choice of whether they want to disclose or not. But I suppose in regards to reasonable accommodations, the disclosure has to be made at some point to get these accommodations for your workplace. So I think it's very much a 50-50 in regards to who the onus is on. If an employee or an employer has created that safe space, that trust between the employee and employer, then the disclosure can be made safely. But it is a fear for many with disabilities, as it's so hard to prove that you have been rejected from a role because you've disclosed this disability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one, so we do see sometimes, you mentioned it there as well, Stephen, that what is reasonable, what is unreasonable, what is unjust, and if we do it for one, maybe we'll have to do it for everybody as well. And those type of attitudes are not great, and that's not going to encourage a system or a culture of safety, let's say. And we had other questions around, maybe people don't provide or have access to adjustments, accommodations in advance because maybe they don't know that people need them. So Chris, for example, with captions and with some other assistive technologies, is there a way maybe that the organizations can already be tapped into your organization, and providing that technology first, let's say, or at least that they have some kind of connection with you? So rather than having to ask every employee, do you need something? Rather, it could be, we provide, and maybe select select an assistive technology that you would like? Is that something that you see companies doing?
I think, I'll be honest with you, I think that is the ultimate goal. I think the ultimate goal for all of us, certainly on the panel today, is for all organizations and businesses to be accessible from the get-go. But let's be really fair, that's a long way from happening, because there are organizations that are on the very start of this journey. And as Stephen will know, you can put all the resources in place, but it can take a while to embed. The culture can be a very big thing to provide that, confidence for formal disclosure. So to your point, yes, we love that, and we love organizations to say, look, anybody that needs A, B, or C, we have it here for you. Just let us know. I also know that there's obviously costs to implement, for example, pieces of assistive tech. There could be costs to implement sit-stand desks. So do you put all of them in and potentially have some of them not being used? That also becomes very difficult. What I will say from our experience, and certainly my experience of working with organizations that have maybe come to us or we found each other, and whereby there is a definitive need for a particular cohort of employees that might need either piece of our software, that might then be implemented. Let's just say there are 30 particular licenses for 30 individuals. And slowly but surely what happens is, because that has been implemented, a lot of other employees see that. There's then a confidence, actually, I could really do with that, but I haven't disclosed that I have dyslexia. So I'm now feel comfortable to say, look, I've seen these guys using it. Could you support me? Yes. The point is, it's people coming out of the woodwork. And we've also found from our experience that there are a lot of people that wish to use the software and other pieces of AT and maybe hardware that don't have a diagnosed disability, but it would really support them and allow them to thrive in the workplace. So I think it's a case of starting somewhere. It might be small, but then by that visual aspect that, yes, we are supporting the staff, we'll therefore be able to support all of you. Because with the best will in the world, you can say, right, who needs this? But a lot of people may not have the confidence to say, actually, yeah, I do. So it's a long journey. I think organizations have to get on board with.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this might be a good time then, Chris, for you to show us a little bit of what captions can do, because a lot of, and if you want to share your screen, a lot of people, the assistive technologies and some of these adjustments, accommodations we're putting in place, they aren't, they're very useful, of course, for people that do really need them, but they can also be additional productivity tools. They can also be extra things that just support people. We just had a question there about processing. We live in a more online world, a lot more online calls, and processing information. You just get tired, so there's a lot of things that can just help benefit the workforce in general.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you okay for me to run through this? Can people see my screen?
Yep.
Niamh, how long have I got? We're on 48 minutes so far. You tell me when I need to shut off, because I'll be mindful of what I say.
Yeah, to give us 3 to 5 minutes there. We'll
okay,
see what you can do.
No problem, absolutely fine. So I'll just start by giving you a very high-level overview. This particular piece of software is called Captioned, and the idea being is that the software provides real-time, highly accurate captions, transcription, and it allows for note-taking. It works across Windows, Mac, browser, mobile, as well as things like Chromebooks, and can support individuals that are on meetings like we are on today, so face-to-face but online, face-to-face in person, as well as supporting that hybrid environment. And we'll also work with anything that's pre-recorded, should that be a YouTube or a Vimeo resource, or a recorded webinar that can then be uploaded and then transcribed, allowing the user to then just basically go and play that back retrospectively and comprehend the information at a time and pace that suits them. So I'll give you an idea of how our browser functionality works. There is also a desktop app available. You're able to click record session, and then you have the option essentially to either, depending on your meeting setup, use the microphone. So that would work very well for kind of in-person meetings. There is an online meeting option where you can actually connect to the meeting in question, and by doing so you have live speaker labeling. I'll just show you the microphone so I can keep talking because it'll just be myself. You start the session, and what you'll notice here on the left-hand side as I'm speaking, so the captions appear live, accurately, and also with a very good speed of delivery. On the right-hand side, there is the option or the opportunity for the user in question to start to compile notes. And there are multiple ways that those notes can be compiled. So excuse my typing, but you can simply make a note like so. What you will notice is there is a timestamp. Timestamp becomes very useful because retrospectively, I can click on any of these timestamps, and then the meeting will synchronize to that point in time, allowing me to play it back from that point. If you do have the ability to type at speed, which I can't, you can maybe type more comprehensive notes, or you can just flag things as important, or even copy an entire block of the transcript across. So in terms of who the software can support, if we're covering that neurodivergent umbrella, it could be somebody that has dyslexia that struggles with typing notes. Well, therefore, using the very accurate transcription, you can just copy that across. It could be somebody that has ADHD, maybe inattentive ADHD, and struggles with looking at multiple screens and boxes and tabs, as well as compiling notes and listening along. So it can really support a lot of people. You'll notice that the captions are scrolling down automatically. They can be turned off, and you can scroll back up and then scroll back on and synchronize to the present part of the conversation. You can format your notes if needs be, although a lot of people do that retrospectively. You're able to control what you are seeing, so you can have dark mode or sepia mode, or continue in light mode as I was. And you can also maybe control what sections you are watching. So if having notes and transcription is too much, just reduce that down, just have the notes. You can take this tab out if you wanted to. You can resize this, and I still have the option to flag or mark things as important, despite the fact that that box isn't open. So this is the live environment. What you'll notice here is you're just getting timestamps, but if you join an online meeting, what will happen there is these timestamps will actually be live speaker labels. Let me just end that because it is cloud-based and it can be saved, no limits on storage, and it can be reviewed after the fact. And I'll give you an example, a bit like Blue Peter. Here's one we did earlier. There's a media section available. An entire transcript is available with these speaker labels and the notes that were compiled. Effectively, your own personalized bespoke summary of the meeting is compiled over on the right-hand side. And if we were to sort of play this back, bear with me. Now we call it a widget. You'll see it's fully synchronized. Words are highlighted to follow along. Navigate your way through by clicking on the transcript, or use these timestamps that you've got that will synchronize you to that point in time and then play back from there. The last thing to mention, aside from editing and adding more notes if needs be, you can then export these notes or transcripts out of the software to utilize elsewhere, share with colleagues, drop into a CRM, or even add to a template. Whistle stop tour, Neve. I hope that's enough, but any questions, please let me know.
It's perfect. Yeah, no, it looks great. And two questions. One is, does it translate? Does it give functionality in other languages?
It provides functionality in other languages, but it doesn't translate. So therefore, if you wanted to, I mean, I live in South Wales. I'd love to show you, but I can't speak Welsh, I'm afraid. But if you wanted to converse in Welsh, you get Welsh captions and therefore a Welsh transcription, but it won't translate.
Okay, and then your sales pitch, your differentiator. Why is this better than Teams transcripts?
Oh, yeah, no, good question. Hopefully those that may be following along with the captions, I can share some stats with you, etc., retrospectively, but to be honest with you, that's one thing we pride ourselves on as an organization. Our accuracy far supersedes what is inbuilt software, such as Teams and Zoom, as well as maybe other captioning providers on there. And I can share some data, so I'm not just saying that. And on top of the accuracy, as you can imagine, for an individual with hearing loss that relies on captions, it's imperatively important that they are accurate and also delivered at a good speed of delivery. And then the other point there is obviously if you're using the transcription to form part of your notes, they need to be accurate as well. But on top of that, as you'll see, particularly with this screen, everything is encompassed in one place, easily accessible from somebody's library. You can go and pick up, shortly after, and I'm talking, less than 5-10 minutes after your meeting, you can go and revisit that, as opposed to waiting for a transcript to be downloaded and then reviewed, and then maybe other additional notes you've got. Everything is housed in one place, and it's very intuitive, easy to use, and completely platform agnostic. So Caption will work with Teams, Zoom, WebEx, Google Meet, Skype, etc., whereas Teams works with Teams.
Yeah, and we can attest that Microsoft Teams is not always very reliable, and the transcription and the recordings are not the easiest to access. Is it free for people? There's a monthly cost along with Captioned. I think you can try as an individual, try free for 30 days, but as an organization, I think then you can provide it for your team.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, so there is certainly a free trial for individuals to visit the website and sign up. And then where my responsibilities lie are either through things like the Access to Work scheme, no problem at all, but then maybe larger volume licensing to deploy and implement for maybe a larger cohort of staff. And then the licensing then varies. We offer things like Light, Pro, and Expert license types, all the same functionality, but then a different allowance of minutes depending on needs and requirements. And then we have sort of enterprise licensing, where you can actually share license or seats, share seats, assign seats to staff, retract them, reassigned, full visibility, etc., and things like SSO. So yeah, lots of options and flexibility.
That's cool.
Chris, could I ask a?
Sure.
Sorry, Niamh. Just
No,
as somebody who uses Captions on every Teams meeting and Zoom meeting, there was a question that came up in the chat there that I'd be interested in knowing the answer to as well. Does it cope well with a range of different accents? Because quite often somebody has, maybe, for example, Stephen, a strong Kerry accent. They don't. The captions can be a bit off. So how is it with different accents?
Look, I mean, you're going to have to take my word for this, but I'm trying to show you here. I can attest that, yes, we have organizations using the software, even so we have Glaswegians using it, all the way down to maybe Somerset in the UK using it. And what I can say is I put this up to computer and mic. So if you wanted to say something, either Stephen and or Karen, feel free.
Stephen, you want to say something in your Kerry?
In your thickest Kerry accent, Stephen.
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
I know, yeah, I was actually staying on mute on purposely. So yeah, I don't know if that's picking up there, but hopefully I don't have too thick a Kerry accent anyway.
Well, Chris, you might be worried. You can probably rely on a Kerry man to break it there on you. So
no, it's my fault. I need to change my settings. My fault. I'll answer your question by telling you. Yeah, I mean, look, it's don't take my word for it. Feel free. We can run things like trial licenses or jump on calls and we can do that. But yes, that's again one of the things that we do. We normally show like a video, maybe with strong accents, whereby you can see it working. But yes, it handles those well.
That's
sure.
Super. And yeah, no, it's such a cool technology, and I know you guys are building great ones. But and we're nearly coming to the end, and we'll come back to some of the questions that are there in the chat that we haven't covered. But some of the other things we touched on earlier, some of the myths and the misconceptions. And assistive technology, of course, does have a cost, but oftentimes there are adjustments that we can make to provide the workplace, more inclusive for people that don't have a cost. So I don't know, Karen, if you can share any examples maybe of, a time, a place, maybe an employee needed something that an employer could make their lives better that had, no cost attached to it.
I can give you a perfect example of my own, even just the best interview I ever had. Being hard of hearing, Teams and Zooms can be quite difficult for me. The best interview I had, the employer was not aware of my hearing loss. And as he was interviewing me and as he was asking the questions, he typed in the questions into the chat box. So I could see the questions there without having to ask him to repeat himself. And again, this was something he did himself. He wasn't aware of my hearing loss, and it was something free, so simple, but it immediately made me feel like this is an inclusive employer. This is an employer who considers other people, regardless of whether they actually have a disclosed disability or not, or hearing loss or not. There are so many free, reasonable accommodations. For example, flexible times in work, remote or hybrid options, if possible. There's quite often free software that can be used for, we say, somebody with vision loss or somebody who may need text-to-speech software, something along those lines. There's a number of free ways to be an inclusive employer. Most, if I'm not sure of the statistics, but most accommodations are relatively low cost, if not free.
Yeah, and I think there was in the news just this week that O2 Telefonica Limited had to pay an employee 160,000 sterling for not providing the reasonable accommodations that were recommended by occupational health. He had damaged the discs in his back and found it difficult to stand for long periods of time. It didn't exactly say what those accommodations were, but we can imagine perhaps it was maybe shorter shifts, different shift time, perhaps even providing a chair. In a lot of stores, people have to stand, but actually, standing could be difficult for that person. And so this guy felt he was forced to leave his job, and at the cost of 160,000 for the company. Not only is a financial implication, but it's a brand implication, it's a reputation. Yeah. People with disabilities or people without maybe do not want to work for an employer who is not going to believe the recommendations of occupational health. And that was something else that we had. What if there's a conflict between the recommendations and what you think? And possibly if recommendations are given, you can say if this is true or not, Stephen. And if you don't, provide them, then that individual possibly has a case against you because you're not allowing them to do their best at work, and perhaps they will have to leave their job because of that.
Yeah, I think, obviously every situation is so different and so nuanced that, so for example, if somebody might come to you with 9 recommendations, and it's very important that you give consideration to them. You build that into your process, that you're speaking with that person, you speak with potentially third parties, you speak with their line manager, you give consideration to what potential accommodations are needed, you document them. It's quite a process that you have to put into it. So, you may not make all of those 9 recommendations. You might just be able to make 4 or 5. So ultimately, again, it goes back to what we said earlier on. What you offer the person, the substantive element to reasonable accommodation, it's nowhere near as relevant as can you demonstrate the procedural aspect. So if someone comes with 9 recommendations before I return to work, as long as you can demonstrate, well, look, we looked into these, we spoke with third-party service providers, we looked into grant funding, we looked into redeployment of core tasks, non-core tasks, so on and so forth, and then we made a decision that we can actually only provide you with 3 of these accommodations, or 6 or 8 of them. Again, ultimately, the offer is nowhere near as important as the process. So I think it's really important for every employer and manager to have a clear process in place that everybody is aware of.
Yeah, great. And I'll just kind of try to summarize some of the things that have been covered in relation to the questions. And if you have additional questions, then there's a couple of minutes, so please do ask them in the chat. I think everybody here really, where you are in the organization, you're very much connected to the people that you're recruiting, the employees, and you have a intrinsic maybe motivation to want to help everybody. But unless that cultural mindset, unless those processes are in place within the organization, a job application can be revoked, an offer can be revoked, or people might not be supported when they get into their job. So some of the steps towards the accommodation that Stephen mentioned, is starting at the disclosure. And maybe that is trying to create an inclusive process from the beginning. Mention mentioned that you are open to providing accommodations in the job application. Of course, if you are, and that might need to be a conversation with the C-suite, you know, and trying to change the internal culture without education and training is going to be very difficult. So I would say that one of the key steps is for all organizations to have the disability awareness training, to have reasonable accommodation training that Stephen and that Karen can provide, so that you can get that mindset change up at the higher levels, where they can then sign off and say, yes, we do have budget to allow for the accommodations. So it's around disclosure, it's around creating a safe environment, it's around having an objective analysis of the individual, the needs, creating a process, looking at the burden, and then looking at some of the being able to demonstrate that you've looked through the process. I probably haven't summarized Stephen's 5 points as clearly there, but we will follow up with notes after that. What are your thoughts on aptitude testing as a general hiring process? Yeah, anybody can go for that one. Karen, maybe aptitude testing as a general hiring process, or even sharing the questions with people before the interview.
Yeah, I think that is something that should be done regardless of whether there's a disability or disability disclosure. I think I know some people often say that those kind of accommodations can give an unfair advantage to some people, but I think if it's offered to everybody, it is not an unfair advantage to anybody. I think there are so many options when it comes to the interviewing process, the hiring process in general. As I mentioned before, pre-recording videos, rather than having a person-to-person Zoom or Teams meeting, getting the questions in advance, allowing the person to send in a written, I suppose, essay perhaps of themselves and how they might be suitable for the role. I just want to, if I could just go to one of the questions that was asked. Somebody has asked, what are the views on inclusion passports? I'm assuming that's the same as the reasonable accommodation passport. I'm assuming they're referring to the same thing. I personally, myself, and I'm on the fence when it comes to a reasonable accommodation passport, in that I don't believe they should be required. Now, this is in an ideal world. In an ideal world, we wouldn't need them. Those reasonable accommodations would be there regardless of whether they were asked for or not. But I suppose in the process of getting to that point where all employers would have these reasonable accommodations already, I think it is good in the sense that a person could ask for a reasonable accommodation without having to jump through hoops for it. It's there for them in the passport that they can request these things, and there is then a written record of the accommodations that they have been given or are requesting for the future. I'll also just say that many of the people that I have worked with anyway, and including myself in this, many people aren't aware of the accommodations that are available to them. Many are actually not even aware of the accommodations that they need. So I left, and many of the people I work with have left jobs because they didn't realise that there were these accommodations that they could have gotten. And I have left jobs now looking back, knowing that those accommodations were there or could have been there. I could have done those jobs no problem if those supports had been given to me, but I didn't realise it myself at the time. So again, going back to the question where the onus is on the employer or the employee, I think in that sense, the employer needs to make the employer needs to make the employee aware that there are many accommodations available to them if they wanted.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that we've spoken about before, and now with Stephen, is a lot of people don't know what they don't know. You didn't know that there was support there. You didn't know that you needed it. The employer didn't know that you needed it. And that probably is the crux of everything, really, is that employers need to maybe put out there and say, you know, we have the opportunity to provide adjustments, accommodations for you. please talk to us. And even just that little sentence in a job application or in a job notice, or even just an email, even if you're not hiring right now at the moment, to send out an email just company wide to say, look, we are able to provide things for you. Please talk to us. Don't be shy. You know, but to get that mindset throughout the organization, I really think it comes down to education. And you know, if you've got some good tips and good points today from our great speakers, Stephen, Karen, and Chris, you know, reach out through our network, through leadersforaccessibility.com. You can look for them and you can make an inquiry maybe about them coming to speak to your C-suite, coming to speak to some of the departments, because this really is, you know, it's not just up to HR, it's not just up to employee experience. It is something that has to be throughout the organization altogether. So, and I think unless we have those things in place, then it's going to be very difficult to really create an inclusive environment. So yeah, it starts with education. It starts with hearing voices. So I hope that, you know, you've learned something here today. I really do apologize for, you know, not being able to get Catherine's screen to work. I understand the irony and all of that, but my apologies on
can I just make a point? Can I say one thing before everyone jumps off? We're delivering a reasonable accommodation training program tomorrow. It's very short notice for anybody. A lot of people have jumped off already, but if anybody does want to attend, I think we have 5 spaces left. Starts at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning and finishes at 1. In plenty of time for the weekend. So look, you can shoot me off an email if anybody wants to get in touch as well. So thanks for organising that, Niamh.
Yeah, no worries, Stephen. If you want to send me the details, I'll send that information out now to the attendees. So if anybody wants more in-depth information, and I'll send you everyone's information to connect with Chris, Karen, and Stephen. So thank you so much, and for putting up with our tech issues today.
Thanks very much, Niamh.
Thanks, everybody.
No worries.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Niamh.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Karen, get back to enjoying France.
Oh, I will. I plan to.
Okay.
Thanks very much. Bye now.
Take
Bye
care.
bye.
Everyone have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye-bye
you.
now.
See you again.